Hola mi gente, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about the NASM exam and how you are going to pass. You got this. I'm going to give you 5 tips that I believe will help you pass your exam. Tip number 1, you want to know the OPT model. So the OPT model consists of 3 different levels of training. We have stabilization, strength, and power, and each of those divide into 5 different phases. So you want to know which category is in which, and also which exercises belong in which of the phases. Tip number 2, know your posture and your assessments. You want to know different checkpoints for the squat assessments, so the overhead squat assessment, single leg assessments. So for example, if you notice that a client's feet turn outward, it might be an indication of a overactive soleus, lateral gastrocnemius, or bicep femoris, or it could be an indication of an underactive medial gastrocnemius or medial hamstring. Also, same thing, if knees are moving inward, it could be an indication of an overactive adductor or a bicep femoris, or it can be an indication of an underactive gluteus. For the cardio assessments, make sure you know the YMCA 3-minute step test and the Rockport walk test. There are also different kinds of performance assessments like the Davies, shark skill test, push-up test, all of those. Very important because there will be questions on those, so you want to make sure that you know them thoroughly. Tip number 3, you want to know your planes of motions. So there are 3 different planes of motions. You have your sagittal, your frontal, and your transverse. They each have different motions, and you want to be able to categorize them by motions and give examples of which exercises would classify for them. So for example, a sagittal is responsible for the motion of flexion and extension. So a good example of that would be a bicep curl, right? Or a calf raise. You have your frontal, which is responsible for adduction and abduction, also lateral flexion, so a good example of that would be a side lunge. And lastly, you have your transverse. This is responsible for rotations, internal, external, left, right, and horizontal adductions and abductions. So a good example of that would be a trunk twist. So again, they might ask you questions like, which of the following is an example of a exercise that would be done in a frontal plane, right? And sometimes exercises can be done in more than one plane, but you know, choose the best answer possible. Tip number 4, you want to know the different types of stretches. So you want to know an active isolated stretch versus a dynamic stretch versus a static stretch. Each of those have different purposes, and you would use them in different times in the OPT model. So for example, an active stretch, you bring the muscle to tension and you hold it for at least 30 seconds versus an activated isolated stretch where you would hold the stretch for maybe 1 to 2 seconds, but you would do that for 5 to 10 reps. So making sure that you know each of those and which ones would be appropriate during which phase of the OPT model, depending also on your client's goals. Tip number 5, and this is probably the thing that helped me the most. If you guys purchase the self-study on NASM, I encourage you guys to take the domain quizzes, and it's actually set up really nicely. It'll tell you the percentage of questions that will be in the exam per domain. So for example, domain number 4 has something like 21% of the questions will be on the exam from that section. So it's the highest one, so I encourage you to study that one specifically, and I believe those are chapters 6 through 13, and then like that, right? So you can go, the way I did it was I went through the highest percentages first, just because those would be the biggest chunks of questions that I would have to know, and I did it there, and then I wouldn't move on until I got at least 85% of the questions correct. Now, if you didn't purchase that, there's also things like Quizlet. You can just look up NASM question exams. There's a plethora of resources out there, so utilize them definitely, and just use those as practice. And one thing that I did actually, and I do this a lot when I'm studying or when I'm practicing trying to remember, is I will get the questions I will take an exam, right, and then I'll go through them and I'll see like which questions I got wrong, and I'll write the correct answer, and then I'll voice record myself reading the question with the correct answer, and then I'll just play it. So if I'm in the car, if like right before bed or whenever I have extra time, I'll listen to that recording. And this isn't just for NASM, you guys can utilize it for anything really. And it helps you remember and it helps you learn, and that's just one of the methods that I use to study. So I know I said I was just going to have 5 tips, but I also have some bonus tips. So bonus tip number 1 is get enough sleep. You want to make sure that you're allowing your body rest time. During sleep is when we are saving memories, helping to recover, so really let that information sink in. You want to minimize stress, and I know you guys probably hear that all the time, like, oh yeah, just, you know, chill out. But one of the ways that helps me release some stress is being prepared. So if I know that I scheduled my test and exam, I have a set date, I can prepare for that by studying, by looking at lectures, by doing whatever it is that I need to do to be prepared for that exam. So minimize stress. Be on time the day of the exam. One of the things that stresses me out the most is running late, and I do that quite often, if I'm being completely honest. And it's so stressful, and it's so avoidable. Like, it's so avoidable. Number 3 for that one is making sure that you have everything that you need to be prepared to minimize stress. So you do need to have the AED and CPR cards ready to go. So print those out if they didn't give that to you. If you need water, if you need whatever it is that you need to take, have that prepared in advance. Don't go print that stuff the day of or the morning of. And the location that I had, they actually had lockers, so I can leave my things in there if I needed to. Again, record your quizzes if you need them, practice the questions. And the last tip that I have is read the questions carefully. I can't tell you how many times I missed questions on the practice exams because I didn't read the questions. I was kind of just over it, and I was skimming through it, and I was just like, yeah. And then I would go back to check, and I'm like, I knew this, but I didn't read the question carefully. So you definitely don't want to lose points because you were too lazy to read. But I hope you found this helpful. I wish you all the luck. I know you got this. You're going to pass this exam. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. This exam I took very serious because it will help me provide value to the people that I work with. I actually still use the book all the time. I actually read the whole book, but I know a lot of people that didn't read the book. You don't necessarily have to. That's just the type of person I am. I like to know my information. I read it like maybe 3-4 months before I even took the exam, so I didn't recall any of it, but I read it and it was kind of like a review for me. That's just the way I study. You definitely don't have to do that. Sorry if I sound a little weird. I'm just recovering from a cold, so I'm still a little bit congested, but I hope you have a fantastic day. Please leave comments, any suggestions, anything that you think would be helpful and useful for me for future videos. And reach out to me if you need any help, or if you want a study buddy, anything like that. I'd be more than happy to help if I have the time.